So in this video, we're going to talk about ions. So what are ions? Well, ions, they're formed when you have a neutral atom, okay, either gains or loses electrons. So when you have a atom that either gains or loses an electron, it becomes an ion, okay? So there's two different types of ions, really. You have a cation. A cation is basically a positively charged ion. Right? So if you're thinking about the number of protons, right? If it has more protons than they have electrons, the atom or the ion is positively charged. Okay, and we call this ion a cation. Then you have an anion. An anion is a negatively charged ion. And so in this case, if you think about the number of protons, will be less than your number of electrons. Okay, so those are your two different types of ions that you have. Now, when we're talking about the symbols of how we write ions, like how can you differentiate between a neutral atom and an ion? Okay, well, cations, all right, since I said they are positively charged, we'll write a charge to the upper right of the symbol. So like, for example, let's say we're talking about 23 sodium. Okay, so 20 sodium with the mass number 23, and we want to represent that it has a charge. You'll simply write a plus sign at the top. Now, if you don't write a number, that means it's a positive 1 cation. All right, but here's another example. So you have 24 magnesium, and then we could put a 2 plus. All right, so this simply tells us that there are 2 more protons than there are electrons, while the sodium shows you that there are 1 more proton than there are electrons. All right, so here's another example. You could have something like a Au3 plus. All right, and so this ion simply tells us that there are 3 more protons than there are of electrons. All right, so this tells us this is positively charged. So that's how you show a positive charged ion. Now, when it comes to negative charged ions, same idea, but instead of using a plus sign or a positive sign, we'll use a minus sign or a negative sign. Negative sign, really, right? So, like for example, you have fluorine 18. We'll put a negative sign here. What does that negative sign mean? It means that this fluoride ion has 1 more electron than it has protons. Okay. Let's do another example. Let's look at oxygen 18 to negative. What does this mean? Well, in this case, there are 2 more electrons than there are protons. All right, so it has a negative 2 charge. And then you have another example. You have 14 and 3 negative for this nitrogen ion or nitrogen anion. All right, you have 3 more electrons than you have of protons. All right, and so this makes it a negatively charged ion. Now, as a review, just to remember to calculate how many electrons you have. All right, you could simply look at this equation here, where you have the charge is equal to your number of protons minus your number of electrons. Okay, so this is kind of like in a little equation. Like for example, if you look at this first example here, fluoride, all right, this fluoride ion, all right, so we see that the charge is negative. Remember, if you don't have a number there, but you just see a sign, it's an understood 1. All right, so this charge is a negative 1. All right, so then we were trying to figure out, okay, look at the periodic table and you find fluorine and look at the atomic number. You'll see the atomic number of fluorine is 9, okay, minus, and so now we're trying to figure out how many electrons. Well, then 9 minus what is equal to negative 1? Well, in this case will be 10. So this fluoride ion has 10 electrons, one more than the number of protons it has. Okay, let's look at oxygen. Let's just try the one for oxygen, right? So this was fluorine. Let's look at the one for oxygen. So now oxygen, here we see that it has a -2 charge. Okay, now we need to figure out how many protons it has. Well, you look at the periodic table, you see oxygen has 8 protons. All right, so in this case, 8 minus what is equal to -2? Well, in this case, it's 10. All right, and so we see here that this oxygen has 10 electrons. Okay. All right, so let's look at one of the cations that we mentioned earlier. We mentioned gold, right? And we said that gold in this case had a +3 charge. All right, and so remember, it's number of protons minus electrons. So when you look at the periodic table, you'll find gold, and we'll see that gold has 79 protons. All right, and so if we're trying to figure out how many electrons it has, well, 79 minus what is equal to a +3? Well, in this case, it will be 76. So for this example, we have 76 electrons in the ion of gold.